Hi everybody, welcome to the Stellium Astrology Podcast. I'm Stephanie James, your host, and I'm also the founder of StelliumAstrology.com. And today we're doing an enhanced podcast edition with Alex Trenoweth, and she is CIA Agent 144, which is the Cosmic Intelligence Agency. She's an astrological researcher, and she was a professional school teacher for years and now runs a thriving family consultancy in London. She was also awarded International Astrologer of the Year in 2015 for the Krishnamurti Institute of Astrology, which is the conference that we both were speakers at. So she was crowned the Queen of the conference. And she's done an awful lot of work on astrological indicators in the charts of adolescence, particularly focusing on Jupiter and Saturn, which are two areas of astrology which are really kind of overlooked in a sense, unless they feed into something more personal. Not many people look at the birth chart and go, oh, you've got Saturn in this area, so that means this, and you've got Jupiter here, so that means that. She's really refined and really worked out what Jupiter and Saturn means in a social context and how they work as far as growing up through adolescence, with Jupiter as the learning style and Saturn as the relationship to the authority figure. So really interesting. And we were just wrapping up our conversation. We've just recorded it because Mercury's retrograde while we're recording this, and it's all a little bit back to front. And so I'm recording the intro after the interview, which is probably the right way to do it. But she dropped in a little comment that she said was really, she wished she'd mentioned during the interview, which was, the adolescent brain is like owning a Lamborghini, but driving it with L plates. So I've put her bio in the description, and I will put links to Alex's website. And I really hope you enjoy the conversation that we have as much as I enjoyed being part of it. So Alex, it's lovely to see you. We've been trying to have this conversation now for about half an hour, but we've had some serious Mercury retrograde problems. And we finally managed to get on to the same Zoom meeting room. There were just so many issues. But I've been really looking forward to speaking to you because I'm really interested in some of the work that you do with astrology. And I have mentioned, I think I've mentioned you in the podcast previously, because I've talked people through the social planets and how those social planets are kind of where we find ourselves in the same group of people at school, sharing those experiences. It's our social group. And I don't know if I've mentioned the name of your book, but I know you've you've done a lot of research on this because you've worked in education, haven't you, for quite a long time?
Yeah, I was a teacher, and I was a head of year, which means that all the behavior data came my way for my particular year group. And so from that behavior data, I was able to work out quite a few things about how teenagers behave and how it matches up with our expectations as astrologers. And so my database is huge. Quite accidentally, I acquired the biggest behavior database to answer the question, are children more likely to misbehave on the new moon or the full moon?
Oh.
And there was one other person who tried to answer this question, and they had 600 entries over, I think, one term. But I have nearly 30,000 data entries over 7 years.
Wow.
So me and Robert Curry are still working on it because there's a lot of artifacts in this.
Yeah.
Like, for example, kids don't go to school every single day. They have weekends off and holidays off. And so that could affect, say, for example, Easter's on the full moon. So, that's one full moon we can't count because the kids aren't in school. So it's little things like that we're trying to get right and trying to be as accurate as possible. But so far, where we are, looking at 2 non-consecutive years in school, that children are more likely to misbehave on the new moon rather than the full moon.
That's so interesting.
On eclipses.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating. It's great that you've been able to do this research, and I know you've got a book published in this area, but before we get into that, I just wondered what got you into astrology in the first place.
As a teenager, my mom was reading the horoscopes, and it must have been some sort of special, like, some sort of supplement, because it had like the descriptions of each star sign. And so my birthday is July 20th, so I'm a Cancer, which is already putting me off, right? A Cancer. Who wants to be a Cancer? But my mom says, oh, Cancers, they're home loving and shy. And I thought, well, I guess astrology is a load of rubbish.
Yeah.
And so when people ask me what my sun sign was or my star sign was, I'd always say I'm on the cusp of Leo. I'd never admit to being a Cancer. And this went on for years. And I was in college, still thinking that astrology was a load of rubbish. And I had a friend who asked me, she was an amateur astrologer. She asked me what my sun sign was. And she says, I bet you're a Leo. And just to be contrary, I said, no, actually, I'm a Cancer. And she says, I bet you have something in Leo. And this is the first time I've ever heard of that something else.
Yeah.
And because I always thought it was just about the sun. And so she took out an ephemeris, which looked like this book of magical incantations. And this looked so interesting and full of symbols and numbers and things like that. And so she read this thing, which really made an impression on me, that she could interpret these things. And she says, okay, yep, according to my calculations, you have the moon in Leo. And if my calculations are correct, you're a Gemini rising, which means your Mercury is your ruling planet. And that is also in Leo. So no wonder you feel like a Leo.
Oh, wow.
So that got me really interested in astrology. And I've always been, interested in pushing the boundaries of astrology, especially popular astrology. Not that there's anything wrong with it. It's just that I like to encourage people to look beyond the star signs.
Yeah, I've always said that horoscopes are kind of the gateway drug into astrology. Like it, some people just dabble in horoscopes, but some people get really sucked in and want to go further. But the problem is, and I think that with a lot of what we see on the internet now, I mean, you've got people, it's definitely having a revival, isn't it? Like there's a lot of people that are really interested in going a bit deeper, and they know their moon and their ascendant and about Mercury retrograde, but it's still very surface level almost, isn't it? It's there's an awful lot out there, especially with some of these memes that I see. I think it still isn't quite digging to the depth that it could be. But
I love a good meme though.
Oh yeah, so do I. I'm a meme queen.
I love them. They're like a double joke, right?
Yeah.
And I'd like to create them too, because just because it just gives you, it's very simple. It's very almost childish.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love it.
I'm an astrological researcher, and I say that I'm quite advanced in my astrology studies, but I still love a good meme.
Well, I think maybe that might be the Gemini in both of us then, because it's like it's communicating something very complex in a really simple way. And it's almost like that thing where it's like you kind of almost like it's a little in-joke.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So but yeah, so that's really interesting that's how you found out about a bit more about your chart. And I knew you had moon in Leo, but I didn't know you had Mercury there as well. So do you have anything else in Leo?
Well, my IC is in Leo, and Mercury is conjunct that, just inside the third house.
Wow.
And my Mercury is unaspected.
Your moon's unaspected.
So actually, I function better when Mercury is retrograde.
Oh, wow. Well, you're the one that kept your cool during all of this, me flapping about trying to get things sorted. And I've spent the whole day sort of trying to prepare and make sure that everything's plugged in and get it all sorted. I got a new webcam recently. So, all of these things, trying to get prepared. And then I sat down thinking, right, I must send Alex an email. And about 2 minutes before we were supposed to meet, I looked and I was like, I didn't press send. And, I'm just like having one of those. I don't know if I can blame astrology or pregnancy, really. I think it's a combination of the two, to be honest with you. But yeah, anyway, so it's nice that you get to function a bit better during Mercury retrograde. I guess that's because mine was retrograde when I was born, and mine went retrograde the day I was born as well. So as far as the progressions are concerned, my progressed Mercury will be at its exact degree and minute in October this year, and then from that point onwards it will actually be moving forward. But I've been sort of like retrograde and in that shadow period for my entire life so far.
Wow.
I know, it's crazy. I'm kind of looking forward to it, but maybe that's when Mercury retrograde will actually start working for me. I don't know. But is yours retrograde natally?
Yes.
It is. Oh, okay. So, oh, that's interesting. Do you know at what point it went retrograde?
No, I'm going to have to look that up.
Yeah.
I haven't. I must have looked it up at some point, but I can't remember.
Yeah.
It's
So mine was,
now.
it went retrograde the day I was born, and my ex-boyfriend, his was stationed direct the day he was born. And I found that interesting, that I was like the one going backwards and he's the one going forward. But and it's actually seemed kind of the opposite, to be honest with you. You haven't just worked in education. I mean, you know, I guess you're kind of an educator because you've started up an astrology school, haven't you?
I have. It's called Rohini Academy of Astrology. And what I'm doing at the moment is I'm teaching astrologers how to work with children's charts ethically in a
Wow.
way that doesn't threaten their practice. Because something that I didn't think was a thing is, and I was kind of alarmed to hear that there are some astrologers who think it's okay to have an unsupervised under 18 in their consulting offices. And actually, it isn't okay
Hmm.
because that child could make a complaint against you. And one of the things we learn about in child protection as a teacher is that you never have an unsupervised child anywhere near you. If you're going to talk to a child in a classroom on their own, you have a door open or the windows, so they can see, someone can see in or hear in case an accusation is made. So it's actually very dangerous, this notion that you can have an unsupervised under 18
Mm.
be alone with them. And if you think of being paranoid, look what happened to Prince Andrew.
Yeah.
Who allowed himself to be in a compromised situation. And, he's lost everything. So it's super, super important that astrologers work ethically with children's charts. So I encourage astrologers to work with parents and then teach them how they can work with their children's Jupiter and Saturn, in particular Jupiter for learning styles, and the parent concentrates on their Saturn for the role model position that they have, and teachers as well.
Wow, that's really interesting because I'm actually really interested in ethical practice, and I'm sort of recording. I've recorded a few episodes, sort of going into my reasons for why I started really getting into that side of things. And I don't actually do. I mean, I think I had a client. Actually, I think she was like 17 and a half, or she was just about to turn 18, and we had a consultation. But I generally, when people ask me about their children, I don't even want to comment. I might look at their children's chart and just pick out something generic almost, because it's not something that I want to go into, because I know, I'm aware that what you say to the parent then becomes something that they project onto their child. Mm-hmm. And I was interested because there's an astrologer called Adam Ellenbass who was in India with us at the time. Do you remember? Was it 2018? Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was there as well. And he talked about when his first daughter was born, he said, I purposely didn't want to know. I wanted her birth time, but I purposely did not look at her chart for at least a year because I wanted to get to know my daughter. I didn't want to be constantly looking at all these aspects in a chart, trying to figure things out. And I thought, that's so interesting. I never really thought about it from that perspective, because it's very easy as a human to want to understand your child on another level. And with astrology, there's so much personal influence you can put on the chart as the person reading it. And if you go to an astrologer, they in hand can mention one thing that they may think is nothing, and then you carry that with you and think about that for your child, and that's it. You think that that's going to be their outcome, that's their life, they're destined to behave in a certain way. And we both know that the chart is so multifaceted. We can be a variety of potentials in the chart. So there's that side of the ethical practice with children as well.
Yes, and also for me as a teacher, one of the things that when on my first day of my teaching career, My given name is not Alex. I have another legal name, which I hate
Oh,
because only doctors and bankers use it, and I don't want to hear from either of them.
I'm so
And
intrigued.
and they were calling me by this legal name, and I said, "Listen, this isn't working for me. I don't, you know, link myself to that name. Call me Alex." And so the head teacher said she'd think about it. And then she must have Googled me because the next morning I was brought in and told, in no uncertain terms that if a parent complained about me being an astrologer, I could lose my job because I brought the school into disrepute because it was a Christian academy. So, telling me I can't do something is a sure way to guarantee I'm going to try to sneak it in somehow. So I started off thinking it's going to be terribly clever to use the birth data that I have because it's on the system on the register, the date of birth. And so I thought it'd be really clever to have all the fire signs in one section, all the earth signs in the next, all the water signs, and all the fire signs. But of course, what took over, with the fire signs took over the lesson, the air signs shouted over the heads of the earth signs, and the water signs just kind of sat there in silent shock and rocking themselves to self-soothe. So it was a really bad idea. But so I stopped doing that. And teaching is quite a brutal career. And I taught high school, at secondary school, and it's hard and it's emotionally draining. It's physically quite tough and quite a physical job. Intellectually draining. It's just difficult. And I kind of came to the end of the road, thinking I can't do this. I got children of my own. I got too many things going on. I can't do this. And I was just thinking of if there was some way to pare down all the guesswork that you have to do trying to get to know your classes and things like that. And one day I was teaching Macbeth, and I was thinking, I only got into teaching to pay for astrology classes because I thought I'd have the weekends and summer and Easter and the summer holidays to study, and I could just see that wasn't going to work. But I was thinking, this I can't make this work. And I turned around and looked at my class, and I thought, hold on. You guys all have the same Jupiter sign for the most part, and you all have the same Saturn sign, and your Saturn and your Jupiter are playing off my Saturn and Jupiter. And from then on, I had a much better hold of how to manage my time better, how to organize myself better, and how to understand how my students learn. And a couple of things that I learned, a couple of tricks I learned is instead of putting your mark books in alphabetical order, if you put them in date of birth order. So you have your Virgos at the top and you see your Leos all the way down to the zodiac. And this was really, really helpful. And if nothing else, it helps me to see who my oldest children are compared to the youngest children, because we know from data that it's the younger children that are more often in trouble than the older children. Because it makes sense, right? So the older children are more mature and things like that. So it's actually Leo boys who get into the most trouble.
Oh, right.
They get the most incident sheets, and the school would just call them boys born during the summer, but they're Leo boys.
Oh, wow, that's so interesting. And it's really interesting to me that it clicked to you when you were, you sort of had that moment of realization about the synastry you would have with your students based on your Jupiter Saturn placements, which makes it much more. It's easier to relate to a social group that way, as opposed to a personal relationship where you would look at personal placements and sort of take the whole thing into context. So
I could probably tell a child's Jupiter sign just by looking at them from their size, right?
Yeah.
How big they are.
So what inspired you to start writing your book? It's called Growing Pains, isn't it?
Yes, Astrology and Adolescence is the subtitle. I got through the whole entire Jupiter cycle. So once I had this epiphany, because that is what it was an epiphany, realizing that they all had the same Jupiter sign, I wanted to experience a whole entire cycle of Jupiter. And so I just took notes, kept track of what I was doing, compared the things. And then once I got through that whole entire cycle is when I started writing it. And once I started writing it, bearing in mind that I still had normal teacher responsibilities and there's a lot going on. But once I started writing, it just flowed because I had all these notes and all this experience. And, it didn't take me long to write it at all. And, I try to put in humor into it, And so it was a great moment when it was finally done.
Yeah.
Just because I was so busy teaching, and then didn't be able to do this book as well. It was
Yeah,
really cool.
it's huge. It's an absolutely enormous project. Am I right in thinking that your book came out at your Jupiter return or something?
Let
I
me think. I
remember
think
you
it
writing
came
this
out.
on Facebook. You were like, I'm having my Jupiter return and I've just been published or something like that. And I was like,
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it came out shortly after my Jupiter return. No, shortly before my Jupiter return, because I tell you what happened to my Jupiter return is that that's when I started traveling a lot. The book came out in 2013, but in 2014, I left full-time education and just started traveling. I did a long tour of the States. I did India in
yeah.
2015. Then I did, at the end of 2015, I was back in the States, and then I did a tour of Cape Town, then back to India, Italy, UAC, back to India. I did, really did so much traveling.
I'm
So
picking up a thread here of lots of India.
yeah, I love India. I miss India terribly. But IVC, Institute of Vedic Astrology, they're absolutely decimated by the virus over there. And
Oh, I know.
so, I've had to occupy myself with other things, which, I've been able to do. My consultancy, I work mainly with families, but my consultancy practice has really boomed. And one of the
That's
things that
great.
helped it to boom was I was interviewed by a national newspaper about my
Oh,
work with astrology and children. But I was disappointed that there seemed to be a lot of people who think that, it all ends with the star sign. So I was trying to explain about Jupiter and Saturn. It didn't quite make it into the paper, but my work made it in there. So
yeah.
there's a lot of, astrologers who seem to be, picking up on the idea of how useful it can be to understand a child's star sign. But I think, I'm still going to say I think it's Jupiter for the learning. And you try to memorize each child's sun sign can be quite a lot of work, quite a lot of memory.
Yeah.
Because you see a child manifests so many different personality traits. But the Jupiter is all about their learning. So if you can remember with the Jupiter, as I said, I can tell just by looking at a kid.
Wow.
It makes that information a lot more manageable.
Did you find that there were students with, like Jupiter rising, for example, that they would be more, confident and be able to sort of grasp subjects more than maybe other students that had it perhaps on the IC or, like in a sort of obscured place in the chart, perhaps?
Well, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending how you want to look at it, I don't know a child's date of birth. Time of birth.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And also that makes it unmanageable too. But I operate what I call a triage system. And so the first step is I know everyone's Jupiter and Saturn. I could tell just by looking at them. The second step is if a child's giving me a lot of problems, I'm going to look at a bi-will with their noon chart and my natal chart. And as the authority figure, I can make changes and adjustments to my behavior to suit the child. And sorry, just turning my fan on again.
It's hot, isn't
Make
it?
adjustments for me as the authority figure for that child to suit that child's needs. And the third step is, say, if I have a child who is about to be excluded, I will bite the bullet and call the parent and say, I'm a professional teacher, but I'm also a professional astrologer. I think I can help. And then I ask the parent for the time of birth if they agree. And so far, I haven't gotten into trouble. But I think that if I were a first aider and I saw somebody injured, I wouldn't walk by them and not try to help.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
as an astrologer and as a professional teacher, I have this unique experience, and one side informs the other. And so I think it's actually immoral of me to just pretend that I can't help when in fact there's something that I can do. And the reason why I started thinking like this was because I had a student end up in jail, and I ended up having to visit the student.
Wow.
And we all knew the student was going to be in trouble, and he was done for murder, actually. And as the school outreach person, I had to go visit him in jail, and it just, I still feel awful about it to this day, that, I was kind of pushed into this corner of, oh, you're going to lose your job if a parent complains. And I didn't do anything when I think I could have helped in some way, either with helping the parents get some support into place, or helping this child manage his temper a little bit better. I just think I could have done something more than what I did, which is nothing other than filling in the exclusion forms. So, I keep, that's always running through my mind. We should try to help.
I think that astrology, I mean, definitely the way I see it is it's the helping profession. Like when people come to you with questions, it's because they're having a crisis, or they need answers because something in their life is going in a direction they hadn't sort of planned on, or something like that. The majority of time I have people asking me questions, it's usually because they're having a really, really tough time, and I feel compelled. It's almost like it's just nothing to me to be able to just dip into their chart and give them the best that I can. It's something I enjoy doing. I thrive on it. So yeah, I can imagine it must absolutely have been such an inner conflict that you carry forward. I mean, there's not much. You could have done something, but at the time you thought you were doing the right thing, based on the guidance you'd been given by your superiors. But yeah, it's true. It's difficult, isn't it? Because I know a friend of mine. They've always fostered children, and one of the big rules is you're not allowed to talk about things like spirituality or religion. You're not allowed to influence their belief structure, and it's something that I just think is such a shame. I can understand it, but I think it's such a shame because if you're coming, life is about well, for me anyway, it's about new experiences, and I like to learn. Gemini ascendant wants to sort of hear all the stories and explore all the avenues, and I think it's such a shame that a child that goes into foster care, for example, is literally unless it comes through their friendship group, it cannot come through. That's the only route it can come through, basically. And if you could offer guidance and help that child to understand themselves a little bit better, it would really make a difference. It could make a huge difference to their life. So it's a shame, but there's a safeguarding aspect, like you said before.
Yeah, but they will learn RE, religious education, at school.
Yeah,
and that might be a little bit safer than the parents, influencing them in some way. I spoke to a teacher in South Carolina. I never expected to be contacted by somebody in the Bible Belt to talk about astrology to their RE lesson. But that's what happened. And it was really interesting because what it showed was that these high school students taking this elective course had obviously engaged in astrology on a deeper level than just the sun signs. Whereas the adults for that national newspaper I was talking about, in the comment section, they were saying really ridiculous things like, sporty, I'm an Aries and I'm not sporty. And it's just like, this is the problem of putting things in star sign, because somebody's always going to have that oppositional thing and have to say, Sagittarius, I'm not reckless, or whatever.
Yeah. It's annoying that it gets played down to such basic, and so many people are like it as well. They just don't identify with it because of these really basic understandings of what they are. It's frustrating.
Yeah, like me and my sun sign, home loving and shy,
I've said it before on this podcast. My mum, she always said, I'm a Virgo, but I'm born on the cusp of Leo. Or she said, I'm right on the cusp.
Yeah,
which
I did too.
But she said, I've got a bit of Virgo and I've got a bit of Leo, because she said I've got the stubbornness and the bloody mindedness of Leo, and I've got this helpful side to me of the Virgo. And it was only when I cast her chart that she's got Pluto in Leo, but it's conjunct her sun in Virgo. So I was like,
right,
it just really ties it together. But
so how interesting that she would experience those intense emotions through the people that she socializes with in school, because all her classmates would have their Pluto on her sun as well.
Yes.
So as we're teaching by your group, these personal planets really get picked up on. as we teach
I
children
would
by
say
year
my
group.
mum is quite an intense person as well. So, but yeah, she's actually, just for your reference, she's got Saturn in Scorpio, and she has Jupiter in Cancer, and Jupiter in
Okay,
Cancer in the first house.
right.
So,
I have Jupiter in Cancer too.
oh, right.
So
Oh,
she must
lovely.
be 12 years older than me.
I think she probably is maybe a bit, maybe a bit more. I don't know. But yeah, so she's got a Jupiter Uranus conjunction in her first house and moon rising in Cancer as well. So she's got quite a lot going on there. But yeah, no, it's interesting that my mum made that connection, and she was the one that kind of piqued my interest in astrology actually, from a very young age, because I used to say, do you think that there's something more to it? And she went, well, there must be. And so for me, I'd always want to explore it, which is really interesting. But so yeah, I'm just, my listeners know that I'm going to be a mum soon, and I had somebody contact me a little while ago asking me if I'd interview her for the podcast, based on, she's been doing some studies with children and behavioural issues in their moons, and I immediately suddenly thought of you. I thought, gosh, why haven't I spoken to Alex? Because the work that you're doing is obviously going to be of great interest to anyone who's got children. Obviously I don't know if you would speak to a child with the parents' permission and with if they were accompanied, but
Okay, so with families, I mean, the typical client that I see, it'd be the first time parent of a 13-year-old child.
right,
So they're just coming into adolescence, and they have the first Ptolemaic aspect from an outer planet. So it's transiting Uranus sextile that's natal place at 13. And it's the most difficult age group to teach. And it's
right,
the age group that honestly no teachers really want to teach. I mean,
right.
some do, but I've seen rows in a classroom over who's going to teach year 9, and
I was such an asshole at that age. I mean, I don't know if I ever grew out of it, but I remember really starting to go nuts at that age.
yeah, and it's when children stop listening to their parents and teachers and start listening more to their peers. So, it's really important for parents to have that big conversation about boundaries, about sex, about expectations, before the child reaches that age, so the child can make informed decisions. And I coach a lot of parents who want to be parents, who aren't parents yet, but who are thinking about having a child. And one of the things we always work on is, how a husband and wife or a partner can have very different values. And it doesn't come out until they get to this crisis point. Like, say, for example, if you have a Catholic father and a mother who's in the Salvation Army. So one religion thinks that drinking as part of a ritual communion is okay and acceptable, and therefore might have softer attitude towards drinking in general, whereas the Salvation Army mother would be dead against drinking because it's not a part of their religion. They abstain. And it might be okay within the marriage, because they're adults, but when they have a child who's at that age when they want to experiment and try, it can cause a lot of difficulties between the parents because they haven't talked about this, they haven't explored it. So one of the things I work on with parents who want to be parents is, about how you're going to work with these sort of conundrums when the child gets a bit older, because babies are so cute and lovable and easy to manage. But when they get to be teenagers, and I'm not trying to scare you,
I've got Jupiter sextile Mercury, so I'm always like really like ahead. I'm already thinking about teenage years and things like that as well already.
Yeah, so it's just really important, to understand, everybody has different values and a different way of being brought up and different attitudes towards controversial subjects. And it's good to have the conversation before it get to that crisis point. So, I help and siblings as well, because siblings are often affected by these controversies as well. But in a consultation, so if a child wants to be there, if they can pay attention, all that kind of stuff, I love the child to be there. That's great. They can interact with me and the parent is there. And if anything is disclosed, the parent is responsible. Because you see, some astrologers who think it's okay to work with children's charts have asked me, what if a child doesn't open up to you And I said, you don't want them to open up to you. Do you know some of the things that kids get up to?
Yeah.
And if you don't know how to handle it or who to go to, you've taken on that responsibility. And say that child goes to another adult at school or whatever and says, yeah, I disclosed secrets to another adult. Well, you're in trouble because you have to do something. But as a
Yeah.
parent, they're responsible. So, that's how I work. If a child wants, I think a child should hear everything that I have to say. If they're, past the Jupiter return age, 13, 14, they should hear what I have to say. But it's not, going heavy into their personality or making big predictions. It's just going through the basic phases of development, which are every 3 years on the Jupiter cycle and every 7 years on the Saturn cycle. So 3, 6, 7, 9, Jupiter return, Saturn opposition at 14, 15, and then the Jupiter opposition again at 18. So just, going through those milestones with the parents, so they're prepared.
Yeah.
And I tell parents of, Jupiter return children, this is when all the brain development kicks in. And you really need to engage your child, get them trying new things, going on new adventures. Even if it's, learning a new language under lockdown. I have students who are learning Japanese. That's not on the national curriculum. And it's only because of lockdown that they're able to explore new areas. And I've been coaching parents on how to teach their children, because parents aren't teachers. They seem to think that, you have to talk, hours on end to teach. And that's not how children learn at all. You give them an objective, you let them work on something, you check their work, you give them feedback, take a break, get on to the next thing. And that's how you teach. Get children talking together, on Zoom or whatever, and let them explore. And during the teenage years, and I know this is really, really hard, it's important not to let your teen play on their phones all the time or play on game stations and things like that, because of the brain development. The habits of a lifetime are formed in adolescence. So you don't want someone addicted to games.
It's interesting
like
because it's such a different age now where technology is taking over. I mean, when I did my talk in India, I focused on the Uranus-Neptune conjunction as the kind of the birth of the internet and this new dimension that we're kind of moving into. And I really feel like it was activated at the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. I mean, I know we've got all this technology, but this is where it all got pulled into properly being used and us stepping into this new dimension. And one of the things that I just thought at the time when the whole coronavirus thing happened was, I'm so glad I don't have any children right now, especially school age, because I wouldn't know what to do. I wouldn't know how to educate my child. And you've got to have them at home. You've got to have them understanding what they're doing. You've got to keep them off their phones, but they've got to be using technology in order to learn. It's like just such a huge, massive transition for adolescents to have to shift through.
I feel so sorry for adolescents too during lockdown. I mean, you can't see your friends, your mom and dad are on your case 24/7. You're with your siblings, but families have been given an opportunity to sort through their differences. You can't just slam the door and go off to school or work. You have to work through your difficulties. And I think families have gotten a chance to get to know each other better and get to really appreciate the time they have away from each other in some cases. But teachers have always known that students know more about technology than we do. I mean, my phone, I would often give my phone to a kid and say, can you sort this out for me? Because, I can't do it. But we've always known that they have learning needs beyond what we can give them, with the technology. And they can use the technology far better than we can. And this is, a good thing, but a very challenging thing too, because we've done a really, really poor job of guarding children against pornography.
Right. Yeah.
We've done a bad job because they're all exposed to it. I mean, I heard some year 7s, 11-year-olds talking about something, and I thought, I wonder what that is. So I looked it up on the internet, and then I had to run down to the IT and say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I just did this because I I logged in under my name and looked this thing up, and I'm so sorry. And this is why I had to explain what I was doing.
Oh my God.
I had no idea what this term was. It was, it was embarrassing to say,
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, this is the thing with the internet. It's like, for all the good things that it can offer us, there's so much frightening stuff out there as well. And that a common thing that I'm hearing all the time is that, children have been robbed of their youth. The children these days, that like, even down to things like, I know it sounds silly, but like down to makeup tutorial videos on Instagram. I read a comment underneath one girl's makeup tutorial that said, I feel like the youth of today have skipped that really ugly, awkward phase that literally everybody else went through, because it's almost like they have these beauty standards that they have to keep up with. They've got access to absolutely anything they want to look at. It's at their fingertips, including pornography. And they're much more vulnerable because there's people out there who are catfishing and just it's a whole new area of danger that we never even had to think about when we were younger.
But I think the younger generations are also more, they have more discretion, and they're starting to understand things like body shaming, and which I think is fantastic. One of the things I found out in my research is that this brain development I was talking about, girls start this brain development before boys. So, girls are ready to learn at the age of 11, whereas boys aren't. And when I was a kid, I remember this boy, I was about this age, about this 11-year-old, this boy pinged my bra strap. And I was so angry. And I didn't want to tell my teacher, because I was embarrassed, because I had this horrible, kind of thing about, growing up in front of boys. So, and just having your body change and having men look at parts of your body, and they are, and it's just this horrible thing. But I think young women these days are a bit more wise to how to manage this than I think I was when I was that age. So I think that's one good thing that's come out of the internet. But like you said, there's good things and there's really bad things.
It's interesting actually, because I do think that they seem to be a lot more, I don't know if it's like an old soul or something, but a lot of the young people I speak to, I just think, gosh, they're so mature, like compared to what I was like. And you've said about girls being ready to learn at a younger age. Now, I think I'm maybe either I'm the exception to the rule, or maybe there's something more to this than meets the eye. But I was never really very good at school. I didn't ever, I think I was undiagnosed ADHD and possibly maybe even borderline autism. Like not severe. But as with girls now, they're saying that they're starting to realize that there's been a lot of misdiagnosis as far as girls, because they mask autism differently. And I know I definitely have some of those traits, but I think that for me, I wasn't ready to learn until it was something I was really interested in, like astrology or astronomy. For me, that was it. That's all I wanted to do. Until I got to that point, I could skip all of the other education. And it's not like I wasn't intelligent. It's just that I needed something that I could associate my interest to, and then everything else could feed into that, and that would then make that other stuff useful. But I wondered if you say that like girls are ready to learn more than boys are by a certain age, would you say that could be reflected in the natal chart through some of the masculine or feminine archetypes, if they had stronger placements, like maybe like a stronger Mars in a girl might it may reveal itself as a girl who's probably not as interested in sitting down and learning so soon?
I will say generally my experience is that girls, first of all, definitely better behaved than boys. Full stop. Better behaved than boys. And less likely to be in trouble for disruption, not distracting somebody else from their learning. So I think that's one thing that girls have. Now, what I think you're describing is sort of what I call not engaging the learner in their learning. You know, a teacher should get you interested in learning whatever it is. You know, you know, if you're learning organic chemistry, the teacher should be able to engage you. And this is why I'm saying Jupiter is so important, because if you understand the nature of the Jupiter in your classroom, you can get activities going that are going to get your students curious. That's the thing. You got to keep them interested and curious in whatever it is that they're learning. And you were saying, I think you said you had Jupiter sextile Mercury. Is that right?
I do. And I also have Jupiter conjunct Uranus in Sagittarius.
Oh, right. Okay. So Jupiter is the ruling planet conjunct Uranus. So your Jupiter is really, really strong and a bit rebellious, I have to say, with that Uranus there too.
I was so naughty.
But that would be like the whole entire year group would have that characteristic.
Yes. Yeah, they would. Yeah, and I've got Saturn in Scorpio as well, Saturn Pluto. So I was that generation of Jupiter, Uranus, and Saturn Pluto.
And your mom has a Saturn in Scorpio, right?
Yes, I was my mum's Saturn return.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's really interesting when you do the synastry of the parent and child, you know, because then you can see which parent is the authority figure, you know, which parent, you know, really the child is going to listen to the most often, or is, you know, going to smarten up for. But I tell parents, you know, you have to understand your Saturn or your child will. And they are very good at finding your weak points, and they'll play parents off against each other because that's what kids do. They can sense it. And so a parent who understands their Saturn can hold themselves steady. You know, when a child is ranting and raging because they want to go out, or they break the curfew, or they do something silly, because we know that teenagers' brains are not fully functional in the way that adults is. They can't understand the consequence of their behavior. So they, in our eyes, they do really silly things, and things that we never would have thought they'd do, because we thought, oh, they're sensible, they're responsible, but they still fall in temptation when they're with their friends, and they do these silly things. And you know, society responds by making laws to keep them safe. For example, drinking laws. You know, you can't buy alcohol legally until you're 18. So it's more difficult to get it. You know, kids get it, but you know, it's a lot more difficult. That you can't vote until you're 18. You can't rent a car until you're 24. So there's lots and lots of things that society responds by making laws to keep people safe.
Yeah.
But for parents, of course, it's much more personal and in your face, because you're with this child and they're your responsibility. So it really does pay to understand your Saturn, how your Saturn has progressed, and how you've developed as a person. And I also tell parents, you know, one of the big conversations you should have with your children is about reminding that child that you once went through puberty too. You know, and as an adult, I look back on myself at 13, and you know, I get embarrassed about thinking about all the stupid things I did, and all the first times of everything that you have to go through at that age, your first kiss, blah blah blah, your first broken heart, all those sort of things. And you know, it's really difficult. And so, you know, I encourage adults to heal that inner teenager through reflecting on their own adolescence, so that they can be better prepared to support their teenager.
And what would you say, if somebody wanted to understand their Saturn, could you give some tips as to how they could do that?
Okay, so I have Saturn in Pisces, and one of my key difficulties in teaching really was things like time management and being organized. And so one of the things that really helps me to get in touch with my Saturn is to make my bed every day, because that's where I dream, right? So I'm showing respect to that space. And so, you know, it's that little thing, that little ritual I do every day reminds me, okay, I got Saturn in Pisces. I have to work extra hard at being organized. I have to put the time in. Saturn loves to be worked. So, you know, I would advise, you know, working out your weak point, practice, you know, get it right. And then, you know, you'll strengthen your Saturn. You'll strengthen your authority. You'll feel less guilty about the things that you're not able to manage, because you're taking steps to correct it.
Yeah.
So I really was the kind of teacher who would turn around to write something on the board, and I turn back around and my classroom would be on its ear. So I had to remember, okay, guys, before you leave my classroom, you're going to pick up every single piece of paper and pencil off the floor and tidy up after yourselves. So I wasn't running around doing it for them, because you don't want to bring a class into an untidy classroom. So things like that, so every Saturn sign has these little weaknesses. And I've written about all the Saturn signs in Growing Pains. So if anyone's interested in buying it, it's all there. It's including all the stages of development. So, if you have children as well, all the dates of, when Jupiter was in what sign is all there. So, I highly recommend it for parents and teachers, because it's not meant to be an advanced astrology book. It's meant to be, a step beyond star signs.
That's good, because I have a lot of my listeners, of varying backgrounds as far as their astrological education or journey is. So I've got some people who consider themselves to be advanced, and some people who are literally at the start of the journey. And I know that I've got a lot of listeners who are mums as well. So I know that, any of them listening will probably be thinking, I'm going to have to get that book. But that's not the only book that you've got, is it? You've got another one coming out, haven't you?
Yes, I've just finished this morning the last bit of Mirror, Mirror, famous people and the actors who have portrayed them. And what I did was, for the past couple of years, I've been watching biopics, so movies about real life people. And the first time I saw this film called Julia, about Julia Child, and I can't remember the character's name off the top of my head, but Amy Adams played this character.
Okay.
And Meryl Streep played Julia Child. And I remember looking at Meryl Streep and just totally forgetting she was Meryl Streep.
Wow.
It was like she convinced me that she was Julia Child. And as a child, I was totally fascinated by the French cook. I just loved her voice, and I loved the funny things that she did. And Julia Child and I have the same ascendant. So that was why I liked her, I think.
Yeah.
But so I did all these biopics. So you think about Rocket Man, Taron Egerton playing Elton John. So I did the synastry and the transits that were going on when the film was released. So about 100 of these films, and I got a lot of them. Mara Hatzi, Houdini, Bohemian Rhapsody, The Doors, Walk the Line.
Yeah.
I, Tanya, just there's tons of them. And it's just been really interesting to look at how the synastry works. But I've kept the synastry really simple, basically just oppositions and conjunctions, and a couple squares and whatever, just to explain what's going on. So I just finished it this morning.
Wow.
So, a huge relief.
And perfect timing for you to come onto this podcast.
Yeah, so they'll be coming out soon. We're going to do a big online book launch, it'll be great, because it was a lot of data. If you can imagine, it's about 400 charts. All had to be triple checked to make sure that I didn't say look at the wrong chart or something like that, because it's easy to get confused. And so it wasn't just looking at the spelling and grammar. It was looking at all this data. So it was interesting, and I think people will like it.
Yeah, I am
like
actually
films.
really interested in that sort of thing anyway, because whenever I'm watching a TV show or something where you're looking at the character that they're playing, particularly something like The Crown, for example.
Oh yeah.
Oh, so amazing to watch that, and then to look at the actors playing them and be like, how did they? Is it that they're having a particularly a transit which picks up on a certain aspect of their chart? Or is it just that they almost epitomize everything that this person represented publicly? So The Crown was one. Tudors was good as well. I was watching Tudors with he's really intense, that guy. Jonathan Rhys-Meyers, who plays Henry VIII. So you've got all these, I really like those kind of historical or like kind of those royal dramas and stuff. I really find them interesting. Particularly, I was just so glued to The Crown. And
I really liked different actors playing the same person.
Oh yeah.
For example, Ted Bundy. He's had, I think, 9 biopics made about him. He's an appalling person. Why are we even giving him any attention? But it was so interesting to see what each actor was picking up in Ted Bundy. Like Zac Efron. I can't remember the connections, but he was picking up a certain aspect of Ted's personality that the other actors didn't quite get into.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? The other one that I think Richard Swatton, I've seen him do a talk a couple of times, was George Orwell, and I think he was played. Who was he played by? I can't remember, but their charts were so tied in so well. I wish I could remember who played him now, but it's just so interesting when you see why somebody's chosen, you know, how it kind of makes me think of just because it's really topical at the moment, but Friends and the Friends reunion, and looking at how their characters are totally represented in their natal charts. Like you can see them playing, and it's almost I watched the reunion the other day, and they were almost chosen because of the person that they are, and we all have fallen in love with this character, which is based around, I mean, they wanted to pick Monica because they wanted her to be the romantic interest, the Jennifer Aniston role, the Rachel, but she said, oh no, I'm definitely more of a Monica. And you know, it's really interesting because actually even now on Instagram, she's got on her Instagram channel, she does this thing called Courtney Cooks, and she loves showing off her like obsessively organized kitchen and like cooking all these little meals. And I thought she is Monica, you know. It's funny, I really like it. So but no, I'm also really interested in seeing how celebrities seem to play these things. The Ted Bundy one that you mentioned is really interesting. I've been interested in serial killers and astrology, and done a bit of research, probably nothing like you have, and done a little bit of done a few talks and everything. But it's interesting when people do get selected to play these people. Someone's playing Jeffrey Dahmer soon, aren't they? I can't think what that is now. There's a Jeffrey Dahmer thing coming out.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah,
well, there was someone who played Ed Gein in Hitchcock.
Yeah.
So he was definitely tapping into something, because Ed Gein was the guy that was making a woman's suit that influenced Silence of the Lambs.
Yes.
Yeah, grisly.
Yeah, very grisly. You just made me think of something else just at that moment. Talking about Ed Gein and Silence of the Lambs. Oh yes, Hannibal. Actually, that might be an interesting one to look at, because there's obviously Hannibal was what's his name? The Welsh actor. What's his name?
Anthony Hopkins.
Yes, and he's more recently been played on Netflix. There was a series, I think it was called Hannibal again. I can't really remember now. But he was played by that. I think he's a Swedish actor. Oh gosh, my brain, I've got baby brain at the moment, so I can't remember I cannot remember the name.
I got baby brain and I'm not even pregnant, so.
I heard it never returns the memory completely, so I'm kind of sad about that. But yeah, there's that's it. Mads Mikkelsen, he's kind of been in all sorts of things. He's a very intense and quite strangely attractive guy, playing a younger Hannibal Lecter. And it would be, I'm pretty sure he's got a lot of Scorpio in his chart, but it would be really interesting to look at those two, their synastry actually, because obviously playing such dark characters, and for them there must have a synastry that sort of ties them together. I don't know if you've seen that recent Hannibal series. I would just, one word of advice, don't watch it if you're going to have your dinner, because it's just, I nearly, it's just, yeah, don't.
I tend not to like horror films.
It's more, it's not so horror. It's like, I mean, it is, I suppose, but it's interesting because they recruit a police officer who's like, it's so sensitive. He's like an empath who has this psychic ability, and he can see how a crime has been committed by standing in the crime scene, and he almost has this psychic thing. And because he's so messed up, this is not a spoiler, by the way, but because he's so messed up, because they keep recruiting him for this work and he doesn't want to do it, but they're saying, you're the only one who can do it, they send him to a psychiatrist who happens to be Hannibal.
Are you talking about, is it called Manhunter? Or
no, it's not, but that's great. That's brilliant. It's not Manhunter. What's the Hannibal?
Red Dragon?
It's not Red Dragon, no, because that's Edward Norton with no, it's a new, I say it's new, it's been out for quite a long time now, it's on Netflix, and it's a really amazing series. But yeah, it would be good to see Mads Mikkelsen and Anthony Hopkins charts put together. Actually, that would be really interesting.
If anyone's interested, I got a book on serial killers, The Wolf You Feed. It's currently a PDF, and I when people take my course, they can buy the PDF. It's not edited properly yet, and it's got a ways to go before it's ready, but it's got, for each Saturn sign, it has somebody who's used their Saturn well, and a serial killer who obviously didn't use their Saturn well,
of course not,
and wasn't supported by the authority figure and things like that. So if you want that, it's on my website as a PDF.
Oh my
you
gosh,
just make a donation.
I'm totally gonna get that.
Just make a donation, because I one of the things I do is I raise a bit of money, and I give it to a new teacher, for example, or I buy books for a local school, or phone cards for refugees and things like that. So if you buy the PDF, that's what I do with the money.
That's lovely. And very interesting that you've brought it back to that connection of authority figures, because they do talk about serial killers having it goes back to the early environment, and often the relationship with the parents or the mother mostly, isn't it? So it's a fascinating, actually. And when you look at the natal chart and you look at what's going on, obviously you look at something that's prominent, you think, oh, they've got Sun and Mercury and Venus all together, sitting together in the same sign, or they've got this a heavy representation of planets here, there, or everywhere. But often I think things like Saturn and Jupiter really do get overlooked. If they're not feeding into anything, you can almost go, okay. But when you think about it in the context of what you do, they are so important.
I find that most astrologers don't know what to do with Saturn and Jupiter. They can give me a flat meaning, but they don't understand that those two planets, more than any other, grow and develop with the person, which is why I encourage people to look at, okay, so you got Jupiter in Aries. So the first transiting square, Jupiter will be in Cancer, square its natal position at the age of 3 years old. So the harsh aspects force us into making decisions, or our external environment forces us to do something. We can't just sit with this tension. We have to resolve it in some way. So that's why I use the harsh aspects. But so Jupiter in Aries, the cardinal signs become very important for that person as Jupiter transits through the cardinal signs every 3 years.
Yeah.
And so, I think, understanding Jupiter and Saturn is thinking sort of like in 3D, because you're thinking about the transits already. If someone says to me Jupiter in Aries, I'm thinking, okay, 3, it's going to be Jupiter in Cancer. 6, it's going to be Jupiter in Libra. At 9, it's going to be Jupiter in Capricorn. So I think it's really important to think about those planets that way, because none of the other planets do that. I mean, Uranus does a little bit, but not so much in adolescence.
No. And I have been telling some of my listeners, I've been reading the Midlife is Not a Crisis, and because I'm getting there, and I want to sort of prepare myself for what sort of things to expect, and like these bigger transits that happen at certain points that are like, oh my god, the Pluto square, oh my god, the Neptune square, oh my god, the Uranus opposition, those kind of things, or the Saturn return. But there's so many little things that happen between then that are huge. So and just by pure coincidence, I'm having my Jupiter opening square now, because my Jupiter's at 2 Sag. So I'm wondering if that's probably why I suddenly thought I need to speak to Alex.
It could be.
I think so. I think it probably is, because I don't know, I think these things pop into my head for a reason. Yeah, I found this really, really fascinating. I don't know if there was anything else you wanted to share with us, or if you wanted to add anything.
Just one more thing, if you don't mind me doing a quick advertisement.
Please do.
I also wrote a computer generated report for Adolescence. So, if you're an astrologer and aren't qualified to work with children, you can buy the program to generate these reports through ESOTech, it's called. Or if you're a parent who's listening and you'd be interested in buying, a computer generated report. They're 16, 17 pages long, beautifully illustrated, has all the aspects in it and all the Jupiter cycle and Saturn cycles in it as well. It's 20 Australian dollars from my website. You just go to the generator and you just go to PayPal, and it's really quick, and then you get your report emailed back to you. So it's more affordable than paying me as a live astrologer, and for astrologers it's safer than having an unsupervised child in your consulting office.
Okay, that's a good one, actually. And those generated reports are very good from Esoteric Technologies. I've seen a few myself, actually. So and did you say that you wrote those?
I wrote it. It took me so long. Every sign, every aspect, every little detail. It took me about 2 or 3 years to get it done. And I did it. And it's as I taught English, the language is appropriate for a teenager because that's something that I can do. I think it's very thorough from the perspective of the person writing it is a teacher. And I think it's really important for parents to have an understanding of the child's chart in a way that's not invasive, and they can read the chart. Parent and child can read the chart together, or read the report together, as a way of opening up the lines of communication.
Brilliant. That's great. Well, that's good. And so is there anywhere that you want people to go to buy your books? Because some people prefer them bought from certain places, like your own personal website, for example.
Well, Amazon obviously is going to have these books. Mirror Mirror about the films isn't out there yet, but The Wolf You Feed is on my website. Just go to my product page and you can make a donation. Growing Pains you can get from the Wessex Astrologer. You can get an autographed, signed copy from my website if you like. And so they're in various places.
And what is your web address?
www.alextrenoweth.co.uk, and my surname is Trenoweth.
Okay, and are you on social media?
I'm very creatively called Alex Trenoweth on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. You can
can't imagine there's too many Alex Trenoweths.
There's no other Alex Trenoweths in the world. I'm the only one.
Amazing. Lovely. Well, it's been brilliant talking to you. I know we could have covered an awful lot more. There's so many different things that you do that perhaps maybe you'll have to come back on the podcast at some point and we can have another chat at some point if you'd be up for it.
Fantastic. I would be.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much. It's been lovely catching up with you. And thank you for, explaining a lesser researched and understood area of astrology to my info thirsty listeners.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Alex.